I've got Kevin Smith here. Our radio audience has just returned. We saw a clip of Dogma,
Hello.
originally in theaters in 1999, 25th anniversary of the classic. Starts to return to theaters near you this very week on June the 5th, and Kevin Smith is here. You mentioned just seeing, you're seeing Chris Rock back in the day. You're seeing the whole cast from back of Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. And then you see two who have since, passed on, and Alan Rickman and George Carlin.
Yeah, we got lucky. We've got two legendary performances by two icons. One in the world of comedy and the other in the world of acting or performance. Alan, we got by accident. I never would have pursued Alan because I loved Alan Rickman as an actor. And the idea of putting him in a Kevin Smith movie is just like, I liked him too much for that. But he reached out to us. My exec at the time, John Gordon, who was at Miramax, called up and he goes, "You'll never believe who just came in for a meeting." I said, "Who?" He goes, "Alan Rickman." I said, "Hans Gruber was in the building? Did he blow it up?" And he goes, "No, we're trying to get him to be in this new Merchant Ivory movie." I said, "What did he say?" He didn't want to talk about that. He just wanted to talk about whoever made Chasing Amy. I was like, "I made Chasing Amy." He was like, "He's a huge fan, dude. We should send him a script." So we sent him the script for Dogma and said, "Would you play the voice of God?" Fastest yes I ever got from an actor in my life, shy of Jason Mewes, who says yes before I finish the title. Yes. Alan Rickman received the script from FedEx or via FedEx or whatever, or DHL or International Service in London less than 2 hours after he got the script. He called me. He was like, "I'm in." So what an amazing performance from an absolute icon. And on my Instagram right now, today I put up, we found his deal memo. I've got my own movie theater, Smog Castle Cinemas. So a couple weeks ago, we did our Dogma screenings while I was on tour. And we went digging through the archives to find like cool Dogma stuff. And we found the deal memos that we sent to like Alan, to Ben and Matt. And it's like, "Dear Patrick Whitesoul, we're going to offer your client Alan Rickman the part of Metatron. We're offering scale plus 10, which is like the movie minimum wage." Yeah, right. Like it's so low. And he did it. He gave us that amazing performance for movie minimum wage. Carlin I pursued because Carlin was a family heirloom. Carlin was a gift to me from my father when I was 9 years old, when he gave me Class Clown and said, "Do not let your mother hear you listening to this." So, I grew up with Carlin, and my father loved Carlin. I loved my father, so there's a damn good chance I was going to love George Carlin, and I did. And one day I made a movie, and then I got to make another movie, and the third movie. Because of the third movie, they let me make the fourth, and we got this character in it in Dogma, Cardinal Glick. So I was like, we have to get George Carlin
to play a cardinal, like a well-known atheist.
Yeah, let's say I like to think of George as a lapsed Catholic. Okay, you want to put him in the atheist category, that's fine. But he was probably the world's most famous lapsed Catholic, as I like to think.
I will accept that.
So we reached out to his manager, Jerry, because we were like, let's find out, man. We'll make him an offer to be in a movie. Like, he doesn't act nearly enough. So. You say, "Hey man, this is Kevin Smith. Scott Mojo is my producer." I said, "We made Clerks." And Jerry's like, "I don't know what that is." And I was like, "All right, then you ain't gonna know the second movie is Mallrats." And he goes, "Never heard of it." I was like, "Well, we made a movie recently. It's getting good press, Chasing Amy." He's like, "Nope, never heard of that."
Oh boy.
And I was like, "Well, we co-executive produced Good Will Hunting." He goes, "Ben and Matt, I know those guys." And I was like, "Okay, well, we're making the new Ben and Matt movie, man. We want George to be in it." And he goes, "George, you want George to be a comic in your movie?" I said, "No, I want him to act. I got a role for him." He goes, "What's the role?" I said, "He played Catholic Cardinal." He goes, "Oh, George will love that." But he cursed quite a bit, which I guess we can. Right. So it was, he set up a meeting where I got to meet George, and it's a very touching story I've told many, many times. But he goes, I love your script, because it messes with the church. I have to always edit and take out the bad words. It messes with the church. He's going, "But we got a problem. My wife just passed away." And his wife had passed away within the last week, 2 weeks of this meeting. I said, "I know, I'm real sorry." He goes, "Me too, man. She was a cool lady. I'm going to miss her." He goes, "Because of that, I'm not ready to take off my wedding band just yet. And I know I'd have to as a Catholic cardinal, so we find ourselves in an impasse. But I had an idea last night. If you let me put a Band-Aid around my wedding band in the movie, I can wear my wedding band in real life and still be in the movie, play the Catholic cardinal. You know, what do you think? I was like, I think I wish you were my father, man. That's the most beautiful thing I ever heard. You can wear as many band-aids as you want. So he was, most people don't know the thing about George. He wanted to act more than anything else. Kind of backed into being one of the greatest comedians of all time.
Right.
That wasn't his aim. He wanted to be Danny Kaye because his mom was a big Danny Kaye fan, and he wanted to, you know, make his mom happy and stuff. So he wanted to act, and that was the one thing I could give him. Even though they were Kevin Smith movies, like, he got to act, and he dropped like a performance in this movie that I had to keep pushing. I said, just be more George Carlin, and he wanted to like truly inhabit the character. He was a method actor. And I was just like, I know, but this part only works if you're George Carlin. Just do it in George Carlin's voice. And so every movie we ever did, in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, he plays a hitchhiker who offers road comfort to a truck driver. Like, that's it, man. It's like, you don't got to be Daniel Day-Lewis to get into the inner life of the character. It's a one-note joke, right? And he came up to me on set and he goes, Kevin, I have a question for you as the author of this piece. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I'm talking about the unwritten book of the road. Do I believe that? Does my character believe in that? Or am I messing with you two guys? And I was like, George, you've already given the script more thought than I ever did when I wrote it. I was like, but if I had to pick a side of the fence, I always assumed your character believed in what he was saying. He goes, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. That's the intention I'm going to play. And I was like, George, I think it's adorable that you're giving it this much thought, but like, you could phone this one in, man. You're just the hitchhiker who gives road comfort to the trucker. And he goes, Kevin, you don't know anything about the subtle art of performance, do you? And I said, no, enlighten me. And he goes, I'm an actor, which means it's my job to tell the lie that tells the truth. In order to do that, I need as much emotional honesty and data as possible. I need to hold up or suspend the window of disbelief so your audience can crawl into your magical world. So I don't ask you these questions to be an unctuous actor who demands attention. I simply need to know how deeply you want me to throat this guy. And I was like, I don't know this much. He goes, that's what I thought. That's the intention I'm going to play. He was absolutely wonderful, yeah.
What a story, man.
That's amazing.
One you could share with your mom. It was so cleanly, you know,
well
self-edited. Thank you.
Kevin Smith.
My mom will be like, why can't you do that every time?
Is it true you were looking at Sam Jackson for the role that went to Chris Rock?
Yeah.
And you met Chris Rock.
Yeah, that's, you know what's crazy? I've been doing interviews and I've been doing Q&As after like the 2 screenings a night we had on the road. Nobody's brought that up. People brought up like deep cut stuff, but I forgot. Yeah, we wanted Sam Jackson
for the Chris Rock role,
and Chris Rock lobbied to get the role. Chris Rock was like, he easily said, "I goes, I know you want Sam Jackson," because we were coming off of Pulp Fiction at that point, right? Like Pulp Fiction had only happened a few years ago, and we were making the movie at Miramax, same place. But Chris loved the script, man. And I loved Chris. I loved him when he was on SNL as Nat X and stuff, and in I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, let alone before he had dropped the album Roll with the New, and he was becoming huge. He was becoming the Chris Rock that the culture knows today. So we were lucky to get him in that moment in time. Then he had any interest in the script whatsoever, but he checked in and kept going like, I want this part, I want this part. He was a big fan of Chasing Amy, is what he had said. He said, I'm going to do this movie because when you write the next Chasing Amy, I want the Ben Affleck part. And wisely, he never waited for me to do that. He made a movie, wrote and directed years ago, called Top 5, which is like his version of Chasing Amy, which is an excellent film. It's worth watching and stuff. So yeah, man, we had as the kids say today, a fire cast, all of which people are like still working today. I miss Linda Fiorentino. Linda Fiorentino was our lead, and she played Bethany. And she was coming off of, at that moment in time, Men in Black. At the end of the movie, she's standing next to Will Smith, and she's like the next Man in Black. But I was a massive fan of Gotcha back in the 80s when I was a kid, as well as Vision Quest. And so she was coming off of Last Seduction. Remember that movie, the John Dahl picture?
Berg.
Yep. With Pete Berg.
Damn,
Pete Berg, man, before he was a director himself.
Yes.
And of course, what's his name? The president from Independence Day.
Bill Pullman,
who's like in on the hustle. A fantastic John Dahl picture that she should have been nominated for an Academy Award because she would have won. But if you remember, Showtime aired it once at like midnight before it ever hit theaters, and that disqualified it from Oscar contention. So we were lucky to get Linda Mann. I was a huge Last Seduction fan. Anybody who sees it is. And I watch her performance like every night on tour, and I appreciate it in ways I never did as a kid. It's so damn subtle, and you need that. Everyone else is larger than life because they're playing characters from heaven and hell and dead people. And she's the audience's way in. She's the Marilyn in this Monsters bunch. So as I've been watching it for the last month, I'm like, God, she really honored our film with this performance. She's amazing. Salma Hayek is amazing in the movie. It's crazy. It's an embarrassment of riches. Ben and Matt, of course. Yeah, and then Jason Mewes, who literally steals the show from everybody else.
And Dogma, again, back in theaters June 5th. We've got a hard out on our radio TV show, to use the phrase, in about 3 minutes. When did
erotically charged.
I know that. I understand that. They're going to drop us off the radio and the television.
Is that sex talk as well? It sounded filthy too. No wonder they're getting rid of
it. In the 2 minutes I have, when did you meet Matt and Ben? I know that's a long story.
I met Ben for a Mallrats audition. Right. I had read about him in the trades because him and Matt had just sold Good Will Hunting to Castle Rock. Right. So, 2 actors sell a script for $800,000. I was like, good Lord, that's almost $1 million. So he was coming in that day. I'll never forget Jim Jacks, who was our producer on the movie, late great Jim Jacks. He's since passed. He went on to make like the Mummy movies and stuff like that. He produced Days of Confused. He goes, Ben Affleck's coming in today. And I was like, oh, that's O'Banion from Days of Confused. He goes, yeah, but he's got a potty mouth. We put him in Days of Confused, and the F count went up on that movie by 800%. So he's going, I don't want him in this movie. You got enough Fs in this movie and stuff. And so Ben comes in, and he sits down, and I was like, hey, man, what are you doing here? I heard you just sold the script. I read you guys made $800,000. He's like, how'd you know that? I was like, it's in the trades. He's like, you read the trades? I was like, yeah, it's part of our business. He goes, yeah, I made $800,000. I said, then what are you doing here? We're paying scale in this movie. And he goes, I thought Clerks was pimp. And that was enough. Right then and there, I was like, I love this guy. So we cast him as a bully in Mallrats, kind of like typecast him based on Days Confused. But after that flick, or working on Mallrats with him, that's where I got to know him, fell in love with him and stuff. So when I wrote Chasing Amy, I wrote him the male lead, and I remember I called him like when I was halfway through the script because I was like, I didn't even tell this guy, he might not want it. So I was like, yo, Affleck, I was like, I'm writing my next flick for you to play the male lead, and there's dead silence, and he goes, finally. And I gave him the first half of the Chasing Amy script, and he had to get on a train to go to Boston and stuff. And he's like, this ain't long enough to get me to like Connecticut. I said, oh, well, here's the script for this movie I wrote called Dogma. That'll get you all the way home. So when he called me when he got back to Boston, I said, what'd you think of Chasing Amy? He goes, guy falls in love with a lesbian, real nice. But this Dogma movie, man, I got to be in this one day. And he eventually was. Look at that. We hit the post. I'm a pro.
Radio term.
Wow. I'm a pro, kids. I've been around.
Affleck also the bomb in Phantoms, yo.
Thank you. Look at that deep cuts right there, man.
Cuts.
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back reference. 24 years old this year, that movie.
And Dogma
next year's 25th anniversary.
And Dogma returns to movie theaters for its 25th anniversary. Kevin, our crack staff, Mike Hoskins, pulled what you were referring to. You want to pop it up there? There it is.
There it is. Look at that deal memo.
This is to confirm.
Signed by Scott Mosier, 1997. So you got to, let me put you there in time. Number one, see the stationery. That's our Vulgar the Clown.
Very nice.
August 11th. It's 9 days after my 27th birthday. 1997, in August, we're about 4 months after the release of Chasing Amy, 7 months after it debuted at Sundance, and we got a standing ovation. So at this point, I'm riding so high in my career. Now, Ben and Matt's movie, Good Will Hunting, which we co-executive produced, will be out in August, September, October, November. So 3 more months, at which point that will push us over the edge on Dogma. This was a $4 million movie we were talking about. Yeah. We eventually got to be a $10 million movie because Ben and Matt became Ben and Matt, thanks to Good Will Hunting.
Wow.
Isn't that nuts?
Now, when you got Alan Rickman on the set, did you at any point in time fanboy him about being Hans Gruber and ask him, Die Hard?
Absolutely. And it was funny because I hadn't worked with Bruce Willis. I would eventually work with Bruce Willis. So I worked with both the good guy and the bad guy from Die Hard, man.
Was Reginald Vell Johnson in your future as well? I mean,
I hope, and then I got the trifecta.
Right.
So he was he suffered many questions about a Die Hard, man, but he was a big Jason Mewes fan, and that's the only thing Jason Mewes knew him from. I had been first introduced to his work via Die Hard, but I became a fan, watched everything he did. Yeah. So for Jason Mewes, he was always like, the Die Hard guy said this. He's going, Die Hard said this. And I was like, his name is Alan and stuff. So one day I said to Alan, because I saw like Jason sitting on the steps of the church talking to him, and I go over and I say to Alan when he's by himself, I was like, if Jason Mewes is bothering you, you let me know. And he goes, Jason Mewes could never bother me. He goes, Jason Mewes is the best that America can be. And I said, no. And he goes, Jason Mewes is an American icon, which Jason Mewes still to this day, if I try to correct him on something, he'll be like, which one of us is the American icon? He's like, oh, I guess you're right.
Fantastic. Oh, that's too good.
Oh, because I would have just peppered him with,
Here's how I directed Alan Rickman, man. Like I'd be behind the monitor, watching the performance, doing the take, and then be like, cut, and then you walk over, and that's when you give the actor the notes. So I'd walk over to Alan and be like, thank you, and then I'd just walk back to my chair. Like there was nothing to say. Every choice he made was excellent, except one time I had to correct him.
Yes.
And I gave him a line reading, which actors hate. But he didn't know the reference. He had never seen Karate Kid, so he didn't know wax on, wax off. So he was choosing to deliver it the way an actor would if presented a line they thought was original. And I was like, oh, Alan, I'm from the, behind the monitor. I was like, Alan, it's a reference to a movie, and if you say it like that, don't work. I said, just say it like this, wax on, wax off. So I gave him a line reading. He does the slow turn to me, and he goes, royally trained Kevin, and then turns back to it. You didn't need to direct the guy, man, except that one instance where he was like, what is wax on, wax off? But man, the way he chose to deliver it made me rethink that line in cinematic history, where I was like, oh, I just thought Pat Morita nailed it, but no.
How did he deliver it?
It's big. It was big, Rich.
Like wax on,
wax on. Wax off? Like there was a question mark at the end. I'm not doing it justice. He was a genius, but he really turned it into a to be or not to be type of moment.
Royally trained
Kevin.
Oh my God.
Wax on.
Kevin Smith, everybody here on
Thank you,
Dogma
such a damn pleasure.
On Thursday.
Go see it.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.